Hi, I'm Jennifer Bassett from Thrive in Grade 5. In this video, I want to share with you my favorite primary source that I use while teaching Jamestown. If you don't know, a primary source is a journal entry or an object, painting, photograph, something created by a person who witnessed or lived through an event or a time period. The particular primary source that we're going to use is a text written by a former leader of the Jamestown Settlement. So, when I talk about Jamestown's starving time, I'm talking about the winter months between 1609 and 1610. These months were a devastating time for Jamestown. They're known as the starving time. Settlers were desperate for food. They resorted to eating things that a person would usually never consider eating, like rats, snakes, mice, horses, dogs, cats, boiled leather, even human flesh. After that brutal winter, only 60 of about 500 settlers were still alive. So most of the settlers died during the starving time. George Percy, the man you see in the painting, was the leader of Jamestown during the starving time. He wrote a poignant description of what the Jamestown settlers experienced during that starving time winter. When I use this text with my students, I break it into pieces. I never give fifth graders an entire primary source text. That is just too much for them to handle. We break a primary source into sections, and then we discuss each section one at a time. That's what I'm going to do with you on these slides. This is what George Percy wrote as he was looking back at the starving time. I would point out to my students that he didn't actually write this journal entry during the starving time because just like all of the other settlers, he was desperate. He was starving. He would not have wanted to sit and write during the starving time. Now, all of us at Jamestown beginning to feel that sharp prick of hunger, like when you're really hungry and you get a sharp pain in your stomach because you're so hungry. That's what he means by a sharp prick of hunger, which no man truly described, but he which has tasted the bitterness thereof. So you cannot possibly understand how hungry we were unless you've been in that situation yourself. A world of miseries ensued. So many miserable, terrible things happened, in so much that some, to satisfy their hunger, have robbed the store or the storehouse, for the which I caused them to be executed. So there's already not enough food for everyone in Jamestown. The little food that we do have was in the storehouse. Some people robbed it because they were so hungry. And now he caused them to be executed because they robbed the food that was meant for everyone. Then, having fed upon horses and other beasts or other animals as long as they lasted, we were glad to make shift or make do with vermin as dogs, cats, rats, and mice. So they were so hungry that they were happy to eat those other animals. All was fish that came to net to satisfy cruel hunger, as to eat boots, shoes, or any other leather some could come by. Now that second part, all was fish. When we get to that part, students always say, well, if they had fish, why were they eating those other things? George Percy was actually saying anything that they could put in their stomach was like fish, was like a welcome piece of food that came to net. So they're saying anything they could catch or take or use to put in their stomachs, they were happy to have it. And those being spent and devoured, so those who were just overcome out of their minds with hunger. Some were enforced to search the woods and to feed upon serpents and snakes, and to dig the earth for wild and unknown roots. So some of the people, even though they knew leaving Jamestown Fort would be extremely dangerous because Powhatan warriors were watching the fort and would kill anyone who stepped outside the fort. So even though they knew this, they were so desperate to go out and find things to eat. Many of our men were cut off and slain or killed by Powhatan warriors. So my students by this point already understand why the Powhatan were surrounding the fort and why anyone who left the fort and was caught would be instantly put to death by the Powhatan. So these people must have been so desperate to leave the fort and find roots and snakes to eat. And now famine is the lack of food, beginning to look ghastly and pale in every face. So everyone is pale, everyone is desperate. That nothing was spared to maintain life. So they ate anything they could possibly eat, and to do those things which seem incredible. So to us, the things that they were eating seem horrific. My students will usually say, I would never eat such and such. I would never eat a cat. Sure, in 2024, we would never dream of eating a cat or a horse or boiling leather to eat, but they were absolutely desperate. If you have never been to that point where there is literally nothing to eat and you are so desperate, you can't understand what they went through. You can't possibly understand how it felt to have an empty stomach for days and days and days. They can't possibly understand that. So when I teach my students about the starving time, they are so amazed at what the Jamestown settlers went through, and the ones that survived, their resiliency to come out of the starving time. And having survived and watching so many of the other settlers die, it must have been such a remarkable moment when there was finally another ship that came with some supplies. You'll have to read about the story of when that next ship came in and there were finally more settlers and they had some food with them. It must have been such a sight for them. So I would encourage you to check out my Jamestown unit. Each lesson in the unit has Google Slides that use pictures and interesting information to introduce each unit or each lesson. And I also have lots of primary sources woven into the unit. There is a starving time simulation to go along with the informational text and the slides. So definitely check that out. Look in the description of the video and you will find a link to the Jamestown unit. I hope to see you again soon. Bye.